Plenty of people postulate that Trump is a Putin puppet. Do you think that? I'm going to show you evidence that countervails this very popular within the left side of the political spectrum narrative of Trump being a Putin puppet. So let's get straight to some articles to back this up, because otherwise some of you just won't buy into it or won't believe it. So let's get to it right away. And we're going to start with history, historical examples, if I can get this article to come up. All right, my friends, here it is. Uh, Going back to 2018, this is back in July 11th, 2018, Trump was criticizing Germany for buying all the gas from Russia. And he was saying that this would cause Germany to be held as Russia's captive, that Germany would be subject to the whims of Russia. And Trump had a big bone of contention with that. Not exactly what you'd expect from a Putin puppet, but that's a popular narrative on the left. But even more so, I'll show you something even bigger than that. Trump actually authorized an attack against Putin's Wagner forces in Syria. Indeed, he even bragged about it. This classified battle in Syria, where hundreds of Russian mercenaries, Wagners, were seemingly put to the task of pushing daisies, if you know what I mean. I got to watch what I say on here because the channel kind of don't like certain things being said. But he really made a big deal out of pushing against this. And you can check this battle. This is in Business Insider, but you can go back and check this battle out. It's now listed on Wikipedia. It's called the Battle of Kasham, or however you say it. It was in Syria, and that happened. And there's been other incidences where Trump is pushed against Putin. But a lot of people have a hard time buying that. But even today, what we're saying is that Trump is talking about severe sanctions against Russia should they not agree to the ceasefire deal. Now, see, what a lot of people are having problems with is they're claiming that, well, because Trump talked to Putin, that, well, then that means he's a Putin puppet because he didn't automatically just keep everything going the way it was going in Ukraine. Well, he wants to end the war. Trump wants to end the carnage. He wants to end all the loss of life on both sides. So he's wanting to bring it to an end. So he's been talking with Putin, and he talked with Putin first and kept Europe and Zelensky out of it initially because he knew they weren't going to budge from their current positions, and that wouldn't be acceptable to Russia to start with. So what Trump has done is he's actually managed to get dialogue started, and he's managed to get NATO to step up to spending $800 billion more out of their budget to defend Europe. Now, defense of Europe, $800 billion out of NATO, is that a pro-Putin position? I think not. Putin don't like that. But so here it is. This is an article talking about where the President Trump, J.D. Vance, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, are all in agreement about making Russia face severe economic consequences. Now, this has been worded many different ways in many different articles. Should Russia not sign a deal with the U.S. and Ukraine to end this war. And that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to end the hostilities. It's a war that could put us at risk of being in World War III. Now, here's another thing. This article looks like it's kind of not going wrong. There we go. One of the reasons cited by Trump for having greater U.S. presence in or influence over Greenland, however you want to take it, taking Greenland in, acquiring Greenland, buying Greenland, whatever he's been trying to do. He's been trying to do this since his first administration. He's tried to buy Greenland. He offered to Denmark, and he's still pushing for greater, so shall we say, influence in Greenland. Now, we don't know Trump's a negotiator where he's really trying to go with this, but the reasons he's given for that is because he's trying to control Chinese and Russian military activity in the region. Now, China tried to put a Belt and Roads thing on Greenland, and the United States nixed that with the help of Denmark, actually, in this case. And furthermore, if you really look at the Arctic, the one country who's building up rapidly in the Arctic is Russia. Russia is building all kinds of military bases in along the Arctic, and we're not doing anything like that. So America's wanting more access to the Arctic. It's vital to our defense, because Greenland is where our radar stations are for a Space Force that looks at the launch of Russian primarily missiles. So this is really a defensive position against Russia. Now, a Putin puppet, would kind of ignore this, I would think, or especially wouldn't push for this so hard. But that's another story. And just further back it up, here's more stuff. U.S. actually has resumed military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. What it's as long as Ukraine said is open to the ceasefire. See, Putin had Trump had the realization that if you just kept the money spigot flowing to Ukraine, they weren't going to change anything. He had to shock them. He had to bring them around. And he had agreed to get them to sign the ceasefire agreement. But he also had them sign a mineral deal. And I think that was to placate Trump's own base. I'll show you on that in a minute. So, again, Poland confirms U.S. arms flow to Ukraine have reinitiated. They're at full tilt. Resumes at full tilt. So I don't know how Putin is going to be satisfied with that, because part of Putin's proposition is that there is a demilitarization of Ukraine. And yet if there's a ceasefire and there's not going to be a war, why do we need to be sending all that stuff over there? See, that's a question that some have asked. So let's take it to the next level here. Anyway, so Trump says you have to keep NATO strong. So Trump was meeting with the head of NATO over there. Actually, he came to Washington, D.C. to meet with him. And this is General Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And he was telling him that indeed they have to keep NATO strong. Now, why would a pro-Putin puppet be promoting NATO and NATO strength the way he still is doing? But now, furthermore, Trump's base is not in support of this. Trump is going against his own MAGA base. I'll show you two different things that suggest that. More than 2/3, 69% of MAGA GOPers told the pollsters they did not support sending more funds to Ukraine. 69%. 69% said no more money, no more military aid to Ukraine. And this was, shoot. That's all these articles popping up. Let me find a more stable article here. This has got too many ads popping up. This is another Pew Research poll with very similar findings. According to Pew Research, a majority, 62% of Republicans said the United States does not have any responsibility to help Ukraine defend itself from Russia's invasion. Most of them see it as a European problem. Let me stop the share here. So I'm backing up what I'm talking about here. Pew Research Center. So maybe the mineral deal is just a deal to try to placate his own base, because it seems that Trump is determined to help Ukraine as long as they reach a ceasefire and stop the hostilities. And that is something a lot of people just don't get. They just jump to conclusions, and they take on these little convenient memes. Well, he's just a Putin puppet, and blah, 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 blah. Well, the evidence does not support that. The evidence does not support that at all. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories on the left out there saying, well, Trump did this and Trump that. But if you look at the actions, they don't support that. Talking to someone is not a sign that you're in agreement with them, that you are supporting them, or you're a puppet, that you're trying to negotiate. And what Trump is he's a negotiator. He wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, and he believes in negotiate from a strong point. So he's got to shake the system and get people's attention in order to have that strong hand in the negotiations. And that's what he's doing. Some people say, well, he surrendered everything up front. Well, no, not necessarily. And he's got realizations that there are some things that Putin will demand, and there's reasons that Putin invaded Ukraine to start with. He put the demands out there for what he needed for a peace deal with the West before he ever invaded, and he was ignored. The West said, well, he won't go in. He won't start a war. They were wrong. He did. And I gave reasons in a recent live session where Russia very much fears being invaded. Russia knows their demographics are sliding. They know this is their last best chance to hold some edge to keep other nations from invading them. This is something that Peter Zeihan, who's pretty much a liberal, I think, for the most part, talks about a lot in his Geopolitical videos he puts on YouTube, and he also goes around the country speaking quite a bit. Very popular speaker on the topics of geopolitics. But here's the thing: Russia has been invaded at least 12 times, major invasions, and they've lost in just World War II 1 out of 8 of their people due to the invasion in World War II. And Russia's been invaded by Poland, Lithuania, by Finland. The Finns actually occupied Moscow at one point. So, what's the Poles anyway? So I went through all that in a live session I did on the Green Rigs channel just last night. So you might want to go through and see the statistics that I rattled out during that video. I don't want to repeat them all here tonight because I've already stated them. But the thing is that the Russians are very paranoid about this. Just 15 years ago, March of 2010, I was in Moscow inside the Red Square. I went to the, actually it's what you would call a parliament, the Duma, which is Russia's Congress, whatever you want to call it, building, where they had a big opera. And this opera was, all the seats were packed. And it was a huge theater inside that building. And the whole thing was to celebrate their victory over Germany. This is a big deal. When you lose 1 out of 8 of your people, that's a huge impact on your country. And so, all the other invasions have had to deal with Napoleon and all these others over the many years, is since Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, they have always maintained that Russia needed a far forward field of defense to defend their country. They needed to have the defenses way out there in front of them, just so that any enemies would have time to go through them. They wanted to use the Carpathian Mountains as a natural barrier because there's no natural barrier in Russia. It's just a wide open plain all the way to Moscow. Anybody could drive their stuff across real fast if they could get in there, because it's just flat fields. And so Russia, seeing that their capital city of Moscow, and even St. Petersburg, are very, very vulnerable. Leningrad, that little enclave or exclave, whatever you want to call it, of Russia that's not in Russia proper, they also deemed to be very, very vulnerable to NATO. It's surrounded by NATO nations right now. And the Baltic Sea is practically a NATO sea at this point in time, given the expansion of NATO. And you've got to remember, James Baker III went to Gorbachev and got Gorbachev to agree to the unification of Germany on the provision that NATO will not expand 1 inch toward Moscow, toward Russia. And we see that's been violated extensively. So there's a lot of history there. And the Russians are very paranoid. At least they didn't want to see Ukraine fall to NATO. So that's where they're coming from. Now, I'm not saying that they are right to invade. Wars are terrible in any way you slice it. But that's what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to bring it to an end. He's trying to stop the carnage that is going on there, which would be better for both sides if it could just be ended. And if somehow we could mollify the Russians to think that we're not going to go in, or putting European troops in Ukraine as part of what Russia didn't want to see in the first place. That's part of why they went in to start with. They were trying to prevent that scenario. So this whole European proposal for peacekeepers might blow up the whole deal and continue the war. And this war could get really nasty. It could go nuclear. And a lot of people on the left don't think that. But Putin and Russia see this as an existential threat to their existence. And it's hard for Westerners to understand that. But if you've been to Moscow and you've seen how paranoid they are about this, and if you look at their history, like I said, all the way back to Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, you will see that this has been their defensive objective, is to have as much cushion between them and the West as possible. Now, maybe the West today wouldn't do it. They might be worried about the West of tomorrow, which it might not be the West. You might have Eurostan out there to threaten them from that direction. So Russia wants to be in the best position, defensive position they could be, given that potentiality. So this is a big thing. But Putin, I'm not saying he's a great and wonderful guy. He's not. But then again, the Western leaders aren't all that great and wonderful either right now. So just bear all this in mind, and bear in mind each perspective here, and that everybody's got to give something. Now, Ukraine is really fighting over the eastern parts of Ukraine, which are predominantly Russian speaking, and Russia's already got them in possession. And those places that they wanted to be autonomous from main Ukraine already. That's why they were trying to break away with their Donetsk region, the Donbass region of Donetsk and Luhansk. So this whole idea, now Crimea was actually Russian, and Russia fought, the Crimean War over it, and it was a gift of the Russian oligarchy, basically, of I think it happened under Stalin, or maybe it was under. I have to go back and look again. They basically gave Ukraine at one point Crimea just to mollify them, but Crimea was mostly Russian too. So that's the whole thing. It was a Russian territory, just assigned administratively to Ukraine when Ukraine was inside the Soviet Union. So, you can argue this till the cows come home, but the reality is these areas are under Russian possession right now. And if you really want a peace deal with Russia, Ukraine's got to give up something. Well, maybe Russia could be convinced to give up the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I don't know. Each side should get something out of this in order to save some face. That's typically what happens in negotiations. Let's hope it can go down that road. I don't know. But this whole thing is, we don't know if it'll work or not. We just frankly don't know. But in the long term, that little eastern section of Ukraine, it's got the whole world at risk right now. And the carnage and expense of the war there is astronomical. And it just so happens that the biggest threat to Russia, the United States, and Europe too in the longer term is China. And this is taking our eye off the ball where we need to be. That's a whole lot bigger existential threat to us, to Russia, and everyone else. So we need to forge a peace somehow and focus on the bigger things that lie ahead of us, the bigger strategic challenges. If we don't do that, we're going to fail. I'm going to do a video really soon on my Green Greg's channel explaining that threat, the threat of war with China, how big it really is. A lot of people do not understand it's how grave this threat is. It's far worse than most of you can imagine. So I'll be doing some videos on that topic soon on Green Greg's. So all I got to say is, let's just kind of watch some of the rhetoric going around, and let's hope we can reach a peace deal here. That's the main thing. With that, share this video, because a lot of people don't share this perspective. Trump's just a Putin puppet, and just dismiss everything, ignore everything, and just use these meme expressions, stuff that comes off some of these TV sitcom programs. Not sitcoms, what is it? The little news things. Anyway. There's one program in particular I'm thinking of. I can't come up with the name of the top of my head. But anyway, guys, The View, things like that. Them little cackling chickens on The View, the stuff they say. People are quoting that, and using that kind of stuff. Anyway, we need to step back and quit the two-dimensional thinking and think 4D here, because that's what we're facing. All the arguments I'm seeing flying around right now are all two-dimensional thinking. So Trump is really trying to broker something. So let's hope it works. Anyway. Thank y'all for watching. Subscribe, share this video, bang the bell, and click all if you're not already subscribed. Thank you for watching. Greg out.